Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. Today we're looking back at the hot comics from December 4th, 2020, and I'm recording this a little earlier this week. We're recording it on Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. Schedulement, I had to do this a little bit quicker. I give those dates so you know when this information was most relevant because the current comic market, things change fast. So wanted to make sure you knew when I collected this information so you knew when it was actually the most accurate. This week, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. We got 19 books to talk about this week, although some of them there's a bunch of pairs in this list that we'll talk about as we go through it. So with that, let's see what we can learn so we all make a little bit better decisions about what comics to chase, what comics to be patient on. So let's get into that list. First up, we have A Tomahawk number 0 from 2017. This is a Donny Cates book. Cates had been sending out messages. This book has hit the list several times because Cates saying, something's coming, something's coming. Well, it turned out that what was coming was the artist was working on a Kickstarter for an action figure of this character. Caused the book to jump raw copies up to 25, 9.8 to 150. I thought this was a trap because it was just about an action figure, but it's Cates, so I should have known better. This book is still going 15 to 35, so it's been pretty steady. 9.8 is actually up from that sale back then, but it's just been one sale in the last 3 months because there's not many of these that are slabbed. But this is Cates. It's maintained value. Should have expected that because the community loves Cates. Pretty much anything he does is gold. So there you go. Next, we have Afterlife of Archie number 1. This hit the list because the director or someone associated, or a producer, someone associated with the Riverdale show posted an image of a hand coming out of a grave in a graveyard. And this was after Jason Blossom had died the previous season. That's part of the storyline of this, but they haven't had any really supernatural things in the Riverdale show, so this was kind of an unexpected tease. Back then, this was going, raw copies were going for $20. A 9.8 went for $105. Now it's a $5 to $30 book, so occasionally raw copies are still going in that same range, but for the most part, they're down, going for less. Kind of an I'll be back book, which is kind of what I expected on this one. Next, we're moving into covers. We only have one cover this week. That is Miles Morales Spider-Man number 21. This is a Schumacher 1 in 10, just kind of a cool Miles book, or Miles cover. This is also the death of his uncle Aaron occurred in this issue. Back then, raw copies were going for triple ratio at $30. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. 9.8s are only going for 50 to 60. So this has turned into a bit of a trap. Definitely well down. Still a pretty cool Miles cover, but just not maintained a ton of interest in this particular one. Next, we're going to move into a little DC TV. And we have Green Arrow number 24. This is the first appearance of John Diggle. This hit the list because basically news came out that even though the Arrow show had ended with kind of a cliffhanger of him potentially getting a Green Lantern ring, he had signed on to do some more stuff with the current shows. Turns out he didn't take the ring, but anyway, like raw copies jumped to a $15 to $25 during this period. This book had been around for a long time, even when he was on a active show, hadn't been worth much. But, so I figured this was kind of an I'll be back, but it's actually been pretty steady. 10 to 30, kind of widened the range a little bit, but still in that same range. So another one that's been pretty steady so far. All right, next we're going to move into the first of our paired books, and we're going to move into Comic Buzz. And this is Daredevil number 25, the A cover. That's the first appearance of Elektra as Daredevil. Back then at release, it was going for $50 to $60. I thought, as we'll get into this, I thought this was a big old trap because the solicitations seemed to indicate she wasn't going to stay Daredevil very long. She has stayed as Daredevil for longer than expected, but this book is still down, just not as much as I thought it would be. 20 to 35 now for a raw copy, so a little more than around half of what it was going for before, so you could argue that's still a trap. 9.8s are going 90 to 100, so definitely dropped back down. Still a lot of interest in this. This storyline is still ongoing, and I've heard that it's a really great storyline. That Chip Zdarsky is killing it on Daredevil. So there you go. Our second Daredevil, number 25, is the LaRocca 1 in 25. This was going for 100 plus back then, and still going 70 to 100. This one's kind of falling back less. 9.8 will do $200 to $300 right now. So this one's also down a little bit for those raw copies, but definitely doing really well still. 1 in 25, still going for triple to quadruple ratio. That's really good. And you match a cool 1 in 25 with a key, that usually happens. Next, we're going to move into Doctor Strange, number 384. And this is the first appearance of the Void symbiote type thing that joins with Doctor Strange. I guess they're calling it the Void symbiote. This hit the list because it appeared that same creature joined with Null and Kate's King in Black stuff. So raw copies were going for $30 to $50 back then. Now this is down to a $5 to $20 book. For the most part, it's a $10 book. This was definitely turned into a bit of a trap. And so has maybe less of a trap, but still dropped considerably, is our second print of the same book, Doctor Strange 384, the second print. This one was going for $30 to $40 back then. Now it's a $15 to $30 book, so it's more of an I'll be back, I guess. But both of these books are well down. This didn't appear to have mounted to a whole lot. Our last Comic Buzz book of the week, not our last comic book, we got a whole bunch because this is only our 9th book and we got 19 to talk about, is Thor number 5. First appearance of Black Winter. This book spiked huge back in the summer. It was going for $80 to $100. It had crashed down to like a $15 to $20 book, but then after it appeared, maybe Black Winter had been destroyed. But Cates made a statement about that he was not finished with the character, so it jumped back up to a $50 book. 9.8s were going for $120. Given what had happened before, I felt this was a bit of a trap. It's turned into more of an I'll be back. It's still going 30 to 45. 9.8s are 70 to 100. So it's down. It's definitely down. We'll see when and if Cates really brings this character back and what kind of position it puts it in. But right now, going for less than it was then, but not quite as low as it got after it appeared. Maybe Black Winter had been destroyed. So with that, we're going to move on to a little bit of Marvel movie news, and we got Toxic Avenger number 1, and this is basically that they're working on a Toxic Avenger movie. I think the rights on this is not technically MCU, and that Peter Dinklage had been cast in this movie, probably as the Toxic Avenger. Caused raw copies to jump up to $30. 9.8s were going for $225. Now they're at $15 to $35, so fairly steady, but down a little bit. The 9.8 being up is kind of why I kind of put it in steady as opposed to down, where the raw copies are a little bit down. You could say actually that 9.8s are way up, but there's only a couple of sales of those. So it's kind of a weird book. Raws were down, 9.8s were up. But definitely if you're looking, most of the sales are raw copies. And if you're looking for one of those, definitely, you could have definitely got a better deal just being patient and continuing to look. Next, we have Black Panther Annual number 1. The first appearance of Shuri as Black Panther, although it's in like an alternate timeline thing. But this is technically the first time we see her in a comic. This raw copies were going for 50 plus back then. It's a spec that Shuri would take over the mantle. Raw copies now are 35 to 70. 9.8s are 150 to 250. I feel like maybe I flipped my verbiage on these, but because I called this down, and I do think that's the case because most of the copies are in the 35 to 50 range with just a couple sales a little higher, whereas this was consistently going 50 to 70 before. So that's why I called this one down, and then I'll be back. Still a lot of interest in this, something that may still happen. We haven't got any. We know they're making a Black Panther 2. We don't know exactly where they're going to go with Chadwick being gone. So it'll be interesting to see. Next, we have Young Avengers number 1. First appearance of Kate Bishop. This hit the list again. This maybe has hit the list more than any other book since I've been doing this for a little over for almost 2.5 years. And this hit the list this time because we got set photos from the Hawkeye show. Caused this book to jump up to a $125 book raw again. 9.8s we're going for $350 to $400. I thought this time, with more news about the show and the show actually coming, that this time it was going to actually not do the roller coaster thing, that it was going to continue to keep climbing, and it did. Raw copies now are $200 to $400. 9.8s are going for $1,000 to $1,100, so this is way up. We will see how well the show does, but they got lucky that they had pictures of Lucky the Pizza Dog, so you know it's going to be fantastic. And that leads us into our next two books. First, we have Hawkeye number 11, which is the Lucky the Pizza Dog issue. This whole issue is a Lucky the Pizza Dog story. We did see photos of the dog on the set with both Hawkeyes, with Kate and with Jeremy Renner. So super excited about that. If you've never read that story, it's really good. This issue jumped up to a $15 to $30 book. Raw copies are still going 15 to 25, so just down slightly. Only two 9.8 sales recently of 115 and 200, which is a big range, but there's not many 9.8s of this book really out there to buy, so that's kind of where that's coming from. But a really cool issue. If you've never read it, I recommend it highly. And then we also have Hawkeye number 1 from that 2012 run, the first appearance of Lucky the Pizza Dog. And that book also jumped up to 15 to 20. 9.8 went for $135. That book's now going $50 to $75 for a raw copy, so it is up. 9.8s are going $150 to $250. Again, we know the dog's going to appear, and people, come on, it's a dog. Everybody's like jumping on this, so I should have known this would be up in straight cash, but it has been, at least so far. So we'll see how much they actually use Lucky in the show, but I'm looking forward to the show. Our last 5 books are all Star Wars related, most of them having to do with the fact that The Mandalorian was coming out during this period. First up, we have Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace number 3. This is the first cover appearance of Darth Maul. I know some people claim it's his first appearance. He appears in issue 1 and does speak. So, but anyway, it's for sure his first cover appearance. This book was going for $65 back then. 9.8s were going for $500 because there was rumors that maybe his home planet might show up in the show and some other stuff. Now raw copies are $80 to $200. 9.8s are $550 to $600. So this book has continued to go up, even though there's been it doesn't appear like Dathomir or Darth Maul is going to be brought back in any way. Still continued to climb though. Which is pretty much the case for all Star Wars books. Let's just be real. Next we have Star Wars Darth Vader number 3, the first appearance of Dr. Aphra, another book that has been on and off this list a bunch. Back then we didn't actually get any Aphra news, but people are convinced that she's coming to the Star Wars universe at some point to live action. Back then raw copies jumped up to $100. 9.8s were hitting $250 plus. Now they're going for $125 to $200. 9.8s are hitting $500 to $600. So this has been straight cash. This book has been a slow climb, but it's been a lot of interest for a long time, and people really believe in this character, which, they continue to make content with her in terms of comics. I expect that she will appear at some point. So the last 3 books all have to do with the same character, and that is because Ahsoka said his name, and that is Grand Admiral Thrawn. First up, we have Star Wars Heir to the Empire number 1. First appearance of Grand Admiral Thrawn, first appearance of Mara Jade. Raw copies for this back then were going for $175. 9.8s were hitting $1,500. This is actually the second week in a row this was on the list. I thought this would be straight cash, but it has cooled a little bit. People are kind of like, it's still setting $125 to $225. It doesn't say cool, it's just been steady. And 9.8s are still setting around $1,500. We'll see once we actually get official casting news, or we see some kind of photo. We don't know if he's going to appear in the first season of Ahsoka, but we know that that's probably going to be part of the storyline, because that's who she was looking for during The Mandalorian, and we know she's getting her own show. So at some point we are going to get live action Grand Admiral Thrawn. And right now they've been pretty steady, good value. I mean, high value. So and they've stayed right there. Next, we have Thrawn #1, kind of his introduction to Marvel Comics. I'm not sure if it's actually his first appearance in Marvel Comics. It is his origin in Marvel Comics. Raw copies for this were going for $25. 9.6 went for $130 because there wasn't hardly any of these slabs, so there wasn't really slab sales to report back then on Tom's show. Raw copies now are $25 to $35. 9.8 going $2 to $250. So this is another one that's been pretty, I put it as straight cash. It's really actually been pretty steady. It's up maybe just slightly. Definitely been worth it for raw copies. So yeah, we'll see when this character comes, if this book jumps or not, or if everybody, for the most part, everybody seems to be focused on that Heir to the Empire or the variant of this Thrawn #1, which is this Matina 1 in 50 of that Thrawn #1, which is just a gorgeous Matina cover. 9.8 broke 1,000 back then. Now raw copies are going, well, there's only been a few sales. There's just not very many of these out there. Raws are going, the 2 raw sales were $600 and $900. The 9.8 sale recently went for $3,000. This book, if you can find it, is definitely straight cash. So that is this week's list. We had a bunch of Star Wars. We had a bunch of Hawkeye related stuff. We had Null stuff with the Doctor Strange books. A lot of Donny Cates with Thor and the a Tomahawk. And we had a little Daredevil as well. So a pretty diverse list this week, even though there was multiple books that had like different covers on them that both made the list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.